Verica had worked as a certified interstellar babysitter for almost 10 years. She had cared for younglings of every shape, size, and species, quiet crystal children from Erios, slow-moving bubble babies from Thunra, and even a pair of twin flame cubs that constantly set things on fire. But she had never taken care of a human child before. The agency had told her it would be easy. Humans were small, fragile, and usually polite. They slept often, ate simple food, and followed basic rules, or so the file claimed. Verica had no reason to doubt it until she met Leo. Leo was only 8 years old, with messy hair, bright eyes, and a grin that looked far too confident for someone so young. His parents were leaving for an important space conference, and Verica had been hired to stay with him for the next 2 days. The moment she stepped into the apartment, she noticed his gaze, sharp, alert, and mischievous. "Hello, Leo," she said in her calm, professional tone. Leo tilted his head. "Hi, bug lady." Her antenna twitched. Most children were shy when meeting her for the first time. Leo, however, walked right past her and began pressing random buttons on her translator device. Before she could react, her voice output changed when she tried to speak. All that came out was a loud chicken cluck. Leo's eyes widened. Then he burst into uncontrollable laughter. Verica hurried to reset the device, clucking and squawking. In frustration, by the time she restored her voice, Leo was gone. She heard the sound of small feet running down the hallway, followed by a sharp crash. She rushed to the living room and saw a broken vase on the floor. Leo stood next to it, pretending to look innocent. "It was like that when I got here," he said quickly. Verica took a deep breath, reminding herself of the babysitter code. Stay calm, stay patient, keep control. But this boy was already testing every rule she lived by. "Leo, please stay in one place while I clean this," she said firmly. He nodded, but the moment she turned her back, she heard another strange noise. When she looked again, Leo had opened the tall supply cabinet near the wall. Inside were alien gadgets she used for her work: hover cushions, self-cleaning fabric nets, and even a small anti-gravity training sphere. Leo reached for the sphere before she could stop him. The device activated instantly, lifting him off the ground within seconds. He was floating upside down in the kitchen. "Look, I'm a space bat," he shouted with pure joy. "Leo, that is not a toy," Verica said, trying to grab him, but he twisted away, drifting toward the balcony door. Her heart skipped tiff. He floated outside. The patrol drones would see him, and she would be fined. Maybe even lose her license. She lunged and caught his ankle, but Leo just grinned down at her. "You're fun," he said. Kicking playfully, she pulled him down, deactivating the sphere, and set him back on the floor. He barely stood still for 3 seconds before darting toward the hallway again. Verica followed, but he was already in the small cleaning room. He pressed another button, this time on the emergency food replicator. A loud worry sound filled the air, and then the machine started spitting out piles of blue slime onto the floor. The thick, jelly-like substance spread quickly, covering her feet. Leo stepped in it and laughed when it stuck to his shoes. Verica tried to explain. "In my culture, younglings sit quietly and respect their elders." Leo bent down, scooped up a handful of slime, and stuck it right on her forehead. "Now you're a blue bug," he said proudly. Her antenna twitched again, this time in real frustration. She had been on the job for only 20 minutes, and she already felt exhausted, but she couldn't let him win. He saw she was tired. He'd push even harder. She decided to use her species' best babysitting trick: distraction. "Leo," she said in a calm voice, "I have something interesting to show you, but you have to promise to behave." Leo's eyes narrowed with curiosity. "What is it?" "You'll see," she replied, slowly walking toward the living room, hoping he would follow without destroying anything else. For a moment, it worked. Leo walked behind her, looking around suspiciously, but just as they entered the living room. She saw him glance at the control panel near the wall. Kat told her to move faster. She reached for the small display case to open it and reveal the harmless, glowing crystal inside, something that usually mesmerized alien children. But Leo didn't care about crystals. His hand shot out, pressing 3 random buttons on the wall panel. The apartment lights began to flash in different colors. The air filters shut off, and somewhere in the background, the shower turned on. By itself, Verica froze. Leo smirked. "This is going to be fun," he whispered. And for the first time in her long babysitting career, Verica wasn't sure if she would survive until morning. Verica stood in the middle of the blinking, color-shifting apartment, unsure which problem to fix first. The air smelled faintly of burnt sugar. The shower kept running somewhere in the background, and Leo was watching her with that same little smirk. He didn't move when she stepped toward the panel to reverse his chaos, but the moment her finger touched the controls, he bolted. Her instincts kicked in and she followed, sliding a little on the blue slime still stuck to her feet. Leo's small frame zipped through the hallway and into the storage room where she kept her off-duty equipment. She was still 3 steps behind when she heard a strange humming sound low at first, then rising like a swarm of insects. When she turned the corner, she saw him holding a compact glider drone, one she used for quick grocery runs to the nearby market. It wasn't designed for children, and the warning label glowed red on its side. "Don't touch that," she said in the firmest voice she could manage. But Leo just grinned and tapped the activation panel. The drone's wings unfolded, and before Verica could stop him, it carried him up off the floor. He didn't scream or panic. Instead, he leaned forward like a pilot, steering it toward the front door. She lunged to grab the drone's frame, but he tilted it just enough to slip through her hands by the time she reached the door. He was already outside, hovering over the walkway, 3 floors above ground. Alien pedestrians stopped to stare, pointing their lenses to record the sight. The patrol drones would notice in seconds. Verica's mind raced with worst-case scenarios: fines, loss of license, maybe even a ban from working in human care. She activated her wing pack and shot upward, but Leo, as if sensing her approach, made the drone dip and weave through the air like a wild bird. A few alien children on the street below started cheering for him, clapping and calling out encouragement. In their own languages, Verica's jaw clenched. This wasn't just mischief anymore. This was turning into a public spectacle. She pushed her wing pack to maximum speed and closed in, her fingers brushing the back of the drone. But Leo swerved again, this time toward the market square. The bright open area was filled with stalls, selling alien fruit, glowing liquids, and strange gadgets. As soon as Leo zipped over it, the drone's propellers stirred up a gust of wind that knocked over several lightweight displays. Vendors shouted in alarm while spherical fruits rolled across the ground. One alien merchant reached up to grab the drone's wing, but Leo skillfully dodged and laughed like this was the best day of his life. Verica finally caught up when the drone skimmed low over a fountain. She dove, grabbed the mainframe, and switched the power off in one motion. The drone gave a pitiful whir and dropped gently into the shallow water. Splashing both of them, Leo landed on his feet and immediately tried to run, but she scooped him up under one arm before he could get far. His laughter rang in her ears, not the laugh of someone who felt sorry, but the laugh of someone planning his next trick as she carried him back toward the apartment. The small crowd followed, whispering and laughing. Someone even shouted, "The human flies better than most pilots," which only made Leo puff out his chest in pride. Inside, she set him down and locked the door with a security code. His eyes darted toward the kitchen as if already calculating another route to chaos. "You will sit," she said, pointing at the couch. He flopped onto it with exaggerated slowness, his grin never fading. She sat across from him, determined to keep watch, but in the quiet. She realized she could still hear something odd coming from the other room, a faint beeping sound that hadn't been there before. She narrowed her eyes. "Leo, what did you do before you took the drone?" He shrugged innocently. "Nothing important." Her stomach sank. She followed the sound into the small maintenance closet, and her worst fears tightened around her. The emergency building hatch controls were blinking, which meant the roof access had been unlocked. By the time she turned around, the couch was empty, and the front door was slightly open. Verica burst through the doorway, scanning the corridor in both directions. The faint sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the stairwell, and she didn't even have to guess was Leo. Racing upward toward the roof, she took the steps, 2 at a time, her wing pack giving her bursts of speed. But the boy was fast, far faster than she'd expected for a human his size. The door to the roof was swinging shut when she reached it. A rush of cold evening air hit her as she stepped outside, and the sight froze her in place. Leo was standing at the edge, peering over like a daredevil ready to jump. But he wasn't interested in falling. He was fascinated by the slow, drifting shapes moving through the sky above. Dozens of massive featherwing creatures glided overhead, their long tails glowing faintly in the fading sunlight. They were harmless if left alone, but the city kept them away from rooftops for a reason. They were curious, and anything that caught their eye could turn into a dangerous game for them. And in Leo's small hands was exactly the kind of thing they loved to chase, a flashing, spinning alien toy. "Leo, put that down," Verica said, stepping forward carefully. He didn't even look at her. "I think they like it," he replied. Spinning the toy faster, the nearest featherwing let out a strange chirp and swooped lower. Attracted by the lights, within seconds, more of them began circling, their wings stirring the air. One of the creatures dipped so close that the force of its wing nearly knocked Leo off balance. Verica darted forward and grabbed him, but the toy slipped from his hands. The glowing object tumbled into the open air, and instantly, the entire flock dove after it. Their massive bodies whooshed past the rooftop in chaotic arcs, the wind pulling at Verica's clothes. She pulled Leo away from the edge. But the commotion had already caught attention. Several nearby rooftops lit up with curious onlookers. Some pointed cameras, others shouted warnings. A patrol drone zipped toward them, its siren chirping. Verica's mind spun she could explain an unruly child, maybe even a damaged drone from earlier. But if the patrol recorded her letting a whole flock into the city's airspace, she'd be finished. The featherwings returned, still circling, now peering directly at the boy in her arms. Their low melodic calls almost sounded like they were inviting him to play again. And judging by the spark in his eyes, Leo was tempted. She could feel his small body shift, as if trying to wiggle free. "No," she whispered sharply, tightening her grip. But he tilted his head back toward her, that sly grin spreading across his face. And in that moment, she knew this was only the beginning of the night's trouble. The patrol drone was closing in fast, scanning the scene, and the flock was growing. Restless then, without warning, one of the featherwings swooped so low its talons scraped the rooftop. Not in attack, but in clumsy curiosity. The patrol drone's alarm blared louder. Leo's laugh rose above the chaos, and Verica realized she had seconds to decide their call for backup and risk losing her job, or find a way to get the boy and the flock under control before the city labeled this an emergency. She chose the second option, and it meant doing something she never imagined: turning to the human child for help. Leo blinked at her, clearly surprised that the big green bug was asking him for help. Crouched so they were eye level, her antennae twitching nervously as the featherwings circled closer. "You got their attention before," she said quickly. "Do it again, but this time, make them leave." His grin widened. "You mean I'm in charge?" Her jaw tightened. "For 1 minute, yes." That was all the permission he needed. Leo wriggled out of her grip and sprinted toward the middle of the rooftop. Ignoring the patrol drone's flashing lights, he cupped his hands around his mouth and made a series of loud, strange whistles. The sound wasn't like anything Verica had heard from a human. It was sharp, playful, almost like the calls the featherwings used among themselves, to her astonishment. The nearest three creatures paused mid-flight and turned their heads toward him. Leo whistled again, then started hopping in place like he was part of their flock. The birds, or whatever they were, seemed fascinated, lowering themselves closer. In wide, graceful arcs, Verica's relief was short-lived because instead of flying away, the featherwings landed, all 12 of them. Their huge talons clicked against the rooftop as they approached Leo. Forming a loose circle around him, the boy looked delighted. Reaching up to touch one's glowing tail, the patrol drone crackled. To life, a mechanical voice warning that unauthorized wildlife contact was against city code. Verica stepped forward, ready to drag him away, but the flock shifted, blocking her with their massive wings. One creature tilted its head and dropped something shiny at Leo's feet. Was the spinning toy he'd thrown earlier. Somehow retrieved, Leo picked it up slowly. Eyes wide, they brought it back, he whispered. Then he looked over at Verica, with the expression of someone who just thought of a terrible, wonderful idea. What if we keep them? Her pulse spiked. No, she said immediately, but he ignored her. Spinning the toy again, the featherwings hopped closer, letting out curious warbles. It was only a matter of time before someone from the city wildlife control arrived. And once they saw her in the middle of this chaos with a human child and a flock of protected creatures, her career would be over. She knew she had to break this connection between Leo and the flock. But the boy was clearly enjoying his new role as their leader. If she tried to force him, he'd just run again. And this time she might not catch him before something worse happened. So she made a snap decision, a trick from her earliest babysitting days, the one she swore she'd never have to use. It involved letting the child believe they were winning, right before you turned the game against them. And if it worked, Leo would bring the featherwings exactly where she needed them, without even realizing it. Leo's eyes gleamed as he spun the toy faster, the featherwings following its motion like hypnotized dancers. Verica kept her tone light, masking the urgency building in her chest. You know, she said, there's a much bigger space for them to play, one they would love even more than this roof. That caught his attention instantly. Bigger than this? He asked, squinting at her. Much bigger, she said, nodding toward the distant shimmer of the public sky dome, a vast enclosed park where flying creatures could roam without getting anyone in trouble. Leo tilted his head, weighing the offer. The flock let out soft, impatient trills, shifting around him like they were waiting for instructions. We could race them there, he said, half to himself. Verica smiled inwardly. That was exactly what she wanted him to think. Without another word, Leo darted toward the stairwell door, the toy still flashing in his hand. The flock leaped into the air in perfect unison, following him like he was. Their captain, Verica, launched after them, her wing pack humming, praying no one from wildlife control had yet locked onto their signal. The race through the city's upper walkways turned heads everywhere they passed. Onlookers recorded clips, shouting in disbelief as the small human child led a dozen enormous featherwings like a parade. Leo was laughing so hard he nearly stumbled, but the flock slowed just enough to match his pace halfway to the dome. They hit a Promoma checkpoint guarded by two alien inspectors. They stepped into the walkway, blocking the path. Their eyes went wide at the sight of the creatures swooping overhead. This is a restricted species, one barked. Who is responsible? Verica opened her mouth to speak, but Leo beat her to it, pointing straight at her. She is, he said cheerfully. The inspector's gazes sharpened, one already pulling out a report slate. Her mind raced. There was no time for explanations. Sif. The flock didn't get moving. They'd scatter into the city and the chaos would multiply. She leaned toward Leo and whispered urgently, "If they stop now, the game ends." That was all he needed to hear. Leo took off again, slipping right between the inspectors before they could react. The flock followed like a gust of living wind, knocking the officials off balance. Verica shot past them too, not daring to look back. The dome was only a few streets away now, its transparent surface glowing faintly under the city lights. If she could just get Leo inside and shut the barrier, this entire disaster might end without permanent damage to her record. But with the inspectors shouting behind them and the flock growing more restless by the second, she knew they were running out of time. The sky dome shimmered as Leo and the Featherwings burst inside. Their arrival stirring a flurry of startled gasps from the few evening visitors. The creatures spread their wide wings, soaring freely now without walls or watchers. The air inside was thick with excitement and fluttering feathers. Verica exhaled deeply, relief washing over her at last. They were safe, or so she thought. But as she turned to check on Leo, she noticed his eyes shining with a new kind of mischief. He darted toward a patch of glowing flowers near the dome's center. Reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, blinking device she hadn't seen before. Before she could stop him, Leo pressed a button. And the device hummed loudly, sending out a series of rapid beeps that echoed through the dome. The Featherwings reacted instantly, circling faster and diving lower, their chirps turning frantic. Visitors stepped back nervously, unsure if this was part of the show or something dangerous. Suddenly, a sharp alarm sounded from Verica's wrist communicator. Flashing red wildlife control was inbound, alerted by the earlier disturbances. Panic surged in her chest. Leo seemed oblivious to the warnings, laughing as he guided the creatures toward the large water feature where the glowing plants grew in abundance. Verica grabbed his arm firmly. "Leo, you have to stop. The authorities are coming. This could get us all into serious trouble." He looked at her with wide eyes but didn't resist. Instead, he nodded slowly and pressed another button on the device, causing a soothing melody to play. The Featherwings calmed, settling on the water's edge as if listening to a lullaby. Moments later, a fleet of official hover vehicles arrived outside the dome, their sirens blaring. Officers in sleek uniforms entered quickly, scanning the scene with sharp eyes. Verica stepped forward, ready to explain the situation, but the chief officer stopped her with a raised hand. "We've been monitoring the chaos all evening," the officer said sternly. "But this child's actions have kept the Featherwings from panicking or escaping into the city." "That's unexpected." Verica glanced at Leo, who shrugged with an innocent smile. The officer nodded slowly and turned to the flock, speaking softly in the creature's own language. The Featherwings responded with gentle calls and began to prepare for relocation back to their protected habitat. The crisis was over. But Verica knew this night would change her career forever. The inspector from earlier approached, a rare smile crossing his face. "You did well, Verica, despite the challenges. This human child is unlike any we have cared for before." Leo grinned. "Told you I was fun." Verica laughed, the tension finally breaking. For the first time, she realized that maybe humans were not as fragile or predictable as the file said, and perhaps, just maybe, that was a good thing. Leo sat quietly beside Verica as the last of the Featherwings flew away into the night sky. The city lights twinkled below them like distant stars, and for the first time, the apartment felt calm and still. Verica looked at the boy with a new respect, realizing how much she had underestimated him. "Tomorrow, your parents will come back," she said softly. "And I will tell them everything you did today." Leo turned to her with a sly grin. "Do you think they'll be mad?" Verica smiled, shaking her head. "They will be surprised, for sure. He poked at the small device still in his hand. "The one that had calmed the featherwings, you know," he said quietly. "I like being your troublemaker, but you're not so bad yourself, bug lady." Her antennae twitched in amusement. "And you're the most challenging child I've ever had to watch," she admitted. "But maybe that's why I don't want this to end." Outside, the night was peaceful again, but inside the room, a new bond had formed. Between a mischievous human child and the alien babysitter who had learned to expect the unexpected, Leo looked up suddenly. "Same time tomorrow." Verica laughed and nodded. "Same time tomorrow," she said, knowing that with Leo around, nothing would ever be ordinary again. And so, the story of the mischievous human kid and his shocked alien babysitter was only just beginning.